Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth Newsom and welcome to my BookTube channel. Today I'm doing a video summarizing the books that I read in June. So like the videos before this, I'm going to rate all the books I read, separating them into fiction and nonfiction. First of all, we're going to start with the nonfiction. So my favorite nonfiction book of this month would be Educated. So it's this memoir about this girl who's raised in this really strict Mormon family. Like their dad goes through a phase where they're not supposed to have milk and the constant stockpiling for the end of the world. But I mean, it goes way crazier than that. Like sometimes they don't take their kids to hospitals because they think doctors are evil and things like that. They think the same about the educational system. So it's just really interesting to read about her life because her family grows up kind of like tech Amish in a way. They don't really use a bunch of computers and stuff, and she has to work a lot at educating herself. So what happens is to go into BYU, she studies a lot for the ACT, I believe, but the problem is she doesn't know any algebra, so she has to teach herself Algebra 2 and things like that, and it's just, the journey she goes on is just incredible, and I was completely enraptured, and that's really, really unusual. That doesn't really happen to me with nonfiction books, but I read like half of this in a day, and I finished it soon after just because it was so captivating. Like her writing style, her sense of humor, her stories, like just all the things that happen in here. And then her journey, like she just goes through so much, and then she keeps on doing this thing where she like doesn't trust people and she doesn't completely open herself up to them because she thinks it's a sign of weakness to rely on someone else. And the whole time throughout the book, I was just like rooting her on and wanting her to like get better and improve. And of course she does at the end. That's kind of why the book title is called Educated. But this was actually given to me after my college orientation. One, because it's just a gift, and the author is actually coming to the college I'm going to in September. And then two, I think I'm also studying this for English Composition 1. So I went ahead and read it. That way I can read it a second time in the fall, and I'll have better comprehension by then. And honestly, I was just so excited to get started on like a book I'd be reading in college because I'm really pumped for college. Like I took the tour, I took orientation, and it all just looks really cool. And I think I'm gonna just like everyone and all the activities and stuff and doing my own schedule. And it sounds like a really cool experience. And in case you guys didn't know, this past year has been a gap year. Well, also kind of a super senior year. So in a way, kind of just an extension of my high school years, though I've been pretty busy and not doing a lot of high school level work. But I highly recommend this. This was just about her kind of discovering her own values and applying it to her worldview. I don't think she was specifically trying to support some sort of a religious or political agenda or anything. At least that's what I got. Number 2 would be the Bestseller Code. This is another nonfiction book where I read like half of it in a day. And for me to read that much nonfiction in a day is a lot because generally I'm not that interested. So what's really fascinating about this book is that it pretty much offers writing advice mentioned in a lot of other writing books. But in this book, they talk about how they actually have developed this program with an algorithm that can test with 80% accuracy which books are bestsellers and which books aren't. And this can also be used as a prediction device for books that have yet to be bestsellers. So even though I know, I guess, a lot of the content here, like using more casual language, limiting exclamation points, having strong themes, it was just really cool to see it all broken down in data like that with a computer and knowing that this is all kind of scientifically backed up. And it's really accurate and portrays what it takes for a book to be a bestseller. And then finally, there's The Tipping Point by Malcom Gladwell. So The Tipping Point did have a few interesting points, so to speak. It's ultimately about how once you reach a certain stage of growth, like it's just exponential from there. It compares this like with STDs, it looks at this with bestsellers, and he looks at a lot of other social experiments. He even examines the makings of Blue Clues and Sesame Street and like their approval ratings, how effective they were, and what made them so mesmerizing for younger children and how we can apply that. So ultimately, I think why I liked this book the least was because though it did have a lot of great information, it wasn't as captivating, as educated, and it wasn't as applicable as the Bestseller code. So great information, just not necessarily tons of ways to apply it. And that's kind of why I like to stick more to the self-help genre than things that are more psychological, such as this. Now, on to the fiction. So my favorite fiction book of this month would actually have to be Illuminate. So, as you guys saw on the Kiss, Marry, Kill book tag, I hadn't read Illuminate at that point, but Warren highly recommended it. He really liked it. And I'd seen it before in bookstores, but it just didn't really pique my interest. Because it's not really told from narrative, it's all like kind of emails and text messages and things like that. With that said, it is really interesting how it's formatted like that. But I just didn't think I'd like it because I like narrative where I can kind of be the character and not have all this third-person type material. But, wow, this was an emotional roller coaster, which I did not anticipate. Like, the humor is really good, although, honestly, it's kind of crass at some parts, which is kind of annoying. But it had me kind of, like, chuckling as I read. And then, towards the end, I was like crying and crying and crying. And sometimes I didn't even know why I was crying. Just, man, it is so intense and like, whoa. Like it's just so emotionally engaging. Like, and I did not expect that at all. And I don't usually do fiction books in print, but obviously this is one of the fiction books kind of best read in print just because of like all the unique material. So in this book, the characters are great. They're flawed, of course, and the two main characters actually just broke up before all this went down. And what exactly went down is these people called biotech, they're attacking this illegal mining facility, and they're counting on the people who are being attacked not reporting it since the mining facility is illegal in the first place. So while they're attacking, they also unleash this biological weapon, which is this disease that infects people. Because, I mean, all diseases infect people. Sorry, that was kind of redundant. So anyway, they have three main problems going on. So they start trying to make it where they can let other people know what's happening to them and that they're being attacked. But there's one problem, and that's that this ship, the Lincoln, this enemy warship, is trying to follow them and finish them off before they can tell anybody about the attack. The second problem is the biological weapon that they use. So this disease, it's kind of a zombie-like disease. It's airborne and it's highly infectious, highly contagious. And it kind of has symptoms that are like the after effects of adrenaline and fear, like shaking and things like that. So at first people don't catch it. But then once people are infected, they get crazy and they kind of go on this killing streak or killing spree. So then they have that problem going on. So they shut those people off away and have them quarantined. And then the next problem is the supercomputer. So the supercomputer of one of the ships, the warships for the good guys, has been damaged. So he's kind of going haywire. Ultimately, his goal is to protect the people no matter what. But in doing so, he does some pretty crazy things like blowing up other ships that are on their side and things like that. So all three of these events kind of collide together, and honestly, it took me a while to get really engaged. Like, at first, I was just reading because I enjoy reading, period. Even if it's kind of an average book, I almost enjoy reading for the sake of reading. But then for, like, the last third back here, that was where, like, all the emotions came pouring out of me. And it was where everything just got really, really intense. And I was absolutely hooked, and I'm totally ordering the second book in the series. Highly, highly recommend it. Alright, now that I'm done gushing about Illuminate, the next series would be the Spies series. And it's by BB123321 on Wattpad, also known as Monica. So I was almost surprised at how much I enjoyed this series, but the characters are really good. They really develop and mature throughout the series, as does the romantic relationship between the two main characters. And then also, a lot of the books are really tense and the plot's really well done. I was surprised because the first book was like, okay, I did enjoy it, but it just wasn't as gripping. These last three books were like, wow, like, I was pretty addicted to reading them. So I'm so glad I continued on with this series. I can tell that the author's writing ability has matured and developed a lot, so just so glad that I got to check these out. So the basic premise of the story is that there's this girl and all her family and her friend and some of her teachers at school are actually kind of involved in this other world of espionage and defeating bad guys. So she kind of gets roped into all of this, and along the way, at the end of this first book, she meets a cute guy named Zach who helps her escape from the bad guys, and he protects her and stuff. And in the second book, we get to see much darker aspects of Zach and his history. So in some ways, I guess you could say he's not as likable, but for me, that just made the story so much more intriguing that there's this dark, three-dimensional character who's the love interest. So he has a lot of emotional baggage that he's carrying and that isn't really addressed in the first book, but it's mentioned a lot in the last 3 books of the series. And then the main character, along the way, she ends up taking down a few bad guys and kind of just getting involved in this world of spies and things like that. And now joining me today is my cat, Kevin. So, we're just going to hang out. So anyway, the third book, or the third, I guess, series of this month would have to be the Gender Games. So essentially the basic premise of the Gender Games is that there's this poisonous river flowing between 2 countries, and they're both called Mattress and Patras. So Mattress is a matriarchy primarily ruled by females. Men can only do manual labor. They can't be scientists, doctors, anything like that. They also have to take this test, and if they're judged to be like too violent personality-wise, then they're executed or used for experimentation. And then on the other side of the river, Patras, it's a patriarchy, so women are they're kind of viewed as possessions and stuff, and they don't really have any rights without a husband or a father. So this series was really great. It took some super unexpected turns. Total, the series is like 7 books long, and honestly, I feel like the author could have cut 2 books. Like, at 5 books, I was okay, but for the last 2 books, it was kind of like, But I really love the development of the romantic relationship between the 2 main characters, which actually I didn't anticipate them getting together at the start, so that was really cool. And then I really like the characters themselves. Like, the male love interest character is just so principled and honorable, and he's determined to like wait to do anything with her until their wedding night. Mwah. And so both of them have their fair share of kind of betrayals and hurting each other, but ultimately they deal with it in a really mature way compared to a lot of other romances I've read where it becomes this huge thing. I mean, there's still romantic tension between them, but they're really forgiving with each other, and they're very mature about their disagreements, which was really refreshing to see, because sometimes that's not all too common in romances. And that was probably my favorite part of the book, honestly, is just the 2 main characters and how principled they are, and then just how emotionally mature they are. So the main character, Violet, is sent over into Patras as a spy. And what happened is earlier her brother got taken away because he didn't pass this test, and they judged him to be too violent. So they agree that Violet can see her brother again if she goes over into Patras and tries to take back this scientific article that they stole from Mattress. So that's where we kind of have her, but also she has to pretend that she's married to this other spy in Patras, and things just get very interesting. I'm not going to tell you a lot just because the plot takes a lot of surprising twists. Then there's Launch by Jason Joyner. This was a pretty cool book. It's a Christian book about teens having superpowers. And a lot of this book is really just set it. They do face a bad guy, but there's not a lot of like conflict on a worldwide scale. And since this is a superhero book, I think that'll be coming up in future books. So I enjoyed this. There are a lot of unique things about it. All the characters have really unique powers. And he does a good job making it interesting throughout. I suppose why it's not higher on the list is just because a matter of emotional engagement. I can't give logical reasons for this, but I found some of the other books more emotionally engaging. However, this was a really great book, and I am looking forward to the next book in the series. Then the final book is Sparks. So in this book, this girl discovers she has fire powers, and then she goes to this other world where these other people have powers, and she has to defeat these bad guys. And she also meets a really cute guy along the way. So what I loved about this book is that it had some really modern, relatable references. Like they were asking about kind of like what skill she was really good at, and she thinks, well, I can quote large portions of Star Wars movies. So it had some good modern references like that without being too much, because I've read books where they have like 2 references at least every single chapter, and it gets kind of annoying and a bit much. But that was not the case with this book. And throughout the book, the author had good tension, like something was always going on. There wasn't really a lull in the story or a sagging part. I think my biggest critique of the story would probably be that some of the plot events seem sort of random and disconnected, and I can't always explain that because there's definitely a progression up to the climax and they have an overall goal. Just sometimes the plot events seem really sudden, so I would have rather had more foreshadowing to make them seem more connected. But the story has a lot of potential, and I am going to read book 2 when it comes out in the fall. The love interest is great, though at a few points he annoyed me a bit, but I think we'll see him mature in his character arc throughout the course of the story. Well, there you have all the books I read in the month of June. And this was a high score for me. I actually read 16 books total, one of them being an audiobook. And next month I'm hoping to read a lot of books too, because my brother has challenged me to a book reading contest, and we're going to measure the number of Kindle pages each of us read, and we're going to see who reads more. So that'll be fun. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you like videos like this, then please subscribe, because I make a lot of videos like this. And I'd also love to hear your comments on the books I reviewed this month, recommendations for me, and just like what you think about the books that I read, or if you've read them. Let me know down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!